The withdrawal to Arracourt on the 7th of September 1965 was one of the most important decisions in the Kemkaran battle because it turned a dangerous situation into the beginning of a defensive design. After the Indian attack toward Kasur lost momentum, the Kemkaran sector became exposed to a Pakistani counterstroke by armor. Indian commanders now faced a hard choice: keep holding forward ground that might be overrun, or pull back and create a stronger line where tanks could be stopped. This was not a glamorous moment, and it did not look like victory while it was happening. Yet in armored warfare, the ability to retreat without collapsing can be as decisive as the ability to attack. If you would like to move beyond the podcast, you can see my available books at militaryauthor.me. And at trackpads.com, you will find magazines and galleries with hundreds of thousands of photos and videos to explore. The situation facing Indian 4 Mountain Division was uncomfortable in almost every respect. It had been drawn into the plains of Punjab, even though its structure and habits were not those of an ideal anti-tank formation. It had taken part in the opening Indian moves across the border, but that advance had not broken the Pakistani front or secured the sector deeply enough. The enemy still possessed strong armored reserves, and Pakistan's 1st Armored Division offered the possibility of a heavy thrust through Kemkaran toward Beaky Wind and beyond. A division that remained too far forward risked being struck before it could organize itself. The issue was not bravery versus caution, but whether courage could be made useful by choosing better ground. A withdrawal in the face of an armored threat is one of the hardest maneuvers an army can conduct. Moving forward gives soldiers a sense of purpose, even when the fighting is dangerous. Moving backward can feel like failure, especially when roads are crowded, artillery is falling, and rumors spread faster than orders. Units must break contact without disintegrating, shift guns and vehicles without blocking each other, and re-establish a new line before the enemy arrives. If commanders lose control, retreat becomes flight. If they keep control, retreat becomes maneuver. At Arracourt, the Indian problem was to step back just far enough to deny Pakistan a clean breakthrough, while still holding the ground that protected the routes deeper into Punjab. The line that began forming around Arracourt was tied to the Kemkaran-Beaky Wind Road, the road that helped define the likely direction of Pakistan's advance. For a listener without a map, it is useful to picture Kemkaran near the border, with Arracourt and nearby villages lying farther back along the routes into India. Beyond them lay the approaches toward Beaky Wind, Harike, and the Bias-Sutlej waters, the places that gave Pakistan's plan its larger meaning. If Pakistani armor could pass through this zone quickly, the battle might become a much deeper operational crisis. If Indian forces could block and channel that movement, Kemkaran's loss would not necessarily open the road beyond it. This is why the decision to fall back did not mean simply giving up ground. It meant trading exposed space for time, depth, and a battlefield that could be shaped. The Indian defense needed room for artillery positions, anti-tank weapons, mines, infantry strongpoints, and tanks sighted to fire from concealment or from prepared ground. It also needed a pattern that would not be easily pierced by a single violent thrust. A straight line can be broken if the attacker finds one weak point and pours through. A defense in depth, with overlapping positions and dangerous approaches, forces the attacker to keep solving new problems. Around Arracourt, the goal was not merely to stand, it was to make the enemy's speed betray him. The withdrawal also required Indian commanders to accept a painful public and psychological fact. Kemkaran itself might be lost. Towns matter in war because they are road centers, symbols, and places where civilians live, not just names on operational maps. Giving up a town can look like defeat to soldiers and civilians alike. But defending every forward point to the last can destroy the force needed to defend the larger position behind it. In this case, Kemkaran was important But the road beyond Kemkaran was more important still. The coming battle would show that a town can fall while the enemy's larger purpose fails. That distinction is essential to understanding Asal-Uttar. The name Asal-Uttar would later acquire a symbolic force, often translated as something like the real answer or fitting reply. But the battlefield did not become meaningful because of a slogan. It became meaningful because the ground allowed Indian forces to build a trap. The area included fields of tall crops, village positions, tracks, irrigation features, and soft ground that could restrict armored movement. These features were not enough by themselves. Terrain helps only when commanders and soldiers understand how to use it. Indian infantry had to hold village edges and strong points. Engineers had to lay mines and prepare obstacles. Artillery had to be ready to strike concentrations. Tanks had to be placed where they could hit advancing armor without being thrown into a reckless open duel. The withdrawal was therefore an act of command discipline as much as geography. Orders had to reach units that were tired, uncertain, and in some cases already under pressure. Artillery pieces, ammunition, vehicles, and support elements had to move without losing the ability to fight. Infantry battalions had to occupy new positions quickly enough to avoid being caught in the open. Armor had to be integrated into the defensive plan rather than held as a vague reserve with no clear role. Every hour mattered. A line drawn on paper was useless until men dug into it, guns were positioned, mines were laid, observers found their fields of view, and commanders understood where the enemy was likely to appear. This kind of controlled withdrawal has a long history in armored warfare. Tanks are at their most dangerous when they can turn an enemy's retreat into pursuit, breaking units before they reform. They are far less effective when the retreating force bends but does not break, then reappears on ground that channels and slows the attacker. In the Second World War, and again in later mechanized conflicts, many armored offensives succeeded not because they destroyed every defender at the front, but because they prevented the defender from forming a new front in time. The Indian withdrawal to Asal-Uttar denied Pakistan that clean sequence. It gave the defense a chance to become organized before the armored blow reached its full weight. The risks remained severe. A planned withdrawal can still go wrong if the enemy advances faster than expected, if local commanders misunderstand the timing, or if units become separated. Some Indian troops and subunits in the wider Kemkaran fighting faced confusion and danger as the situation changed. Not every movement was neat, and not every position was perfectly prepared. War rarely rewards anyone with ideal conditions. The achievement at Asal-Uttar lies partly in the fact that the defense was built under pressure rather than in calm. The Indian Army did not have unlimited time, perfect intelligence, or an ideal force mix. It had to improvise a coherent answer to a fast-developing armored threat. For Pakistani commanders, the Indian withdrawal could be interpreted in more than one way. It might signal weakness, disorder, and the chance for exploitation. It might also conceal a deliberate attempt to draw armor forward into prepared ground. The danger in offensive warfare is that both interpretations can look similar at first. A retreating enemy always tempts pursuit, and armored commanders are trained to value momentum when the enemy appears to be giving way. Yet pursuit without enough reconnaissance, infantry support, and engineering caution can become a rush into uncertainty. At Kemkaran, Pakistan's armored plan depended on reading Indian movement correctly. The withdrawal to Asal-Uttar made that reading far more difficult and far more consequential. The withdrawal to Asal-Uttar matters because it changed the nature of the coming battle. Instead of meeting Pakistan's armor in a forward position, where Indian forces might have been split and overwhelmed, 4 Mountain Division and its supporting arms began to create a defensive system on ground more favorable to delay and destruction. It was not an automatic victory, and it did not remove the terror of facing massed tanks, but it turned retreat into preparation, and preparation into opportunity. The history of armored warfare often celebrates the breakthrough, the charge, and the advance. Asal-Uttar reminds us that the well-timed step backward can be just as decisive, especially when it makes a powerful enemy drive into the wrong place.
You've been listening to Famous Tank Battles. These battles were never just about machines. They were about doctrine, terrain, firepower, logistics, and the hard problem of turning shock into victory. For more military history writing and books, visit militaryauthor.me. And for magazines, podcasts, and a massive archive of military photos and video, visit trackpads.com. Thanks for listening.